I love Yuri Perez, who last year was, I've talked a lot about like the degree of difficulty for Royce Lewis and CJ Abrams and a bunch of those guys who are still developing. And Eury Perez is kind of in that boat, was part of the class of players who missed the entire 2020 season, didn't get that development in real games. And also just what he did last season, where the Marlins had to shut him down mid-season, send him back down to the minors. These guys are human. That's a really difficult thing to have to go through. I know we were all frustrated by it. Marlins fans were all frustrated by it. I am certain Eury Perez was more frustrated than anybody about that. And so the fact that he went out, struck out 108 batters, 91 and a third innings in the majors, threw a 3.15 ERA, 1.13 whip, that would be impressive enough. If that was all you could say about Eury Perez making that impact as a rookie, that would be impressive enough. Also, he did it while navigating that incredibly difficult situation where he got sent down to manage his innings. Also, he doesn't turn 21 years old until 2 weeks into the upcoming season. Think about like all of the prospects that we love. And we're like, oh my God, they're so young. They're 20, 21 years old. This guy did this at 21 at double. Well, Eury Perez just did that as a 20-year-old in the majors in a playoff race while getting sent down. So just the degree of difficulty alone and the fact that he made it to the majors and pitched as well as he did as a 20-year-old, we are talking about a profile that probably wins a Cy Young. Like that is just, if you're that good as a 20-year-old, you are probably a Cy Young caliber pitcher at some point in your career. Maybe in 2024, because Eury Perez, 6'9", tall drink of water, 97.5 mile per hour average fastball velocity. He had a curveball that had the second highest whiff rate among all pitchers. His slider had the 9th highest whiff rate among all pitchers. His curveball, or his changeup, had the 8th highest whiff rate. So that is 3 different secondary pitches that were in the top 10, not top 10%, top 10 among all pitchers in Major League Baseball. And again, he does not turn 21 years old until 2 weeks into the upcoming season. I think it's pretty much impossible to overstate how high the ceiling is for Eury Perez. He's almost certainly not going to be the number 1 starting pitcher in fantasy this season because he probably won't throw more than 170 innings or so. He could be top 10. You can get there throwing 170 innings because he might get 200 strikeouts if he throws 170 innings. And he might have a 2.5 ERA and a 1 whip. I love Eury Perez. The Marlins have had some really, really exciting young pitchers throughout their time. I did I don't know if you guys saw that thread that was going around of like, pick a player from every year of the last 25 years for your team. And that's your 26. And it was fun. Go through. Marlins have had some good pitchers. I think Eury Perez is the most promising young pitcher the Marlins have had, certainly since Jose Fernandez. I think he's right there with Jose Fernandez in terms of how excited you should be about a young pitcher. And that's saying a lot because I think Jose Fernandez was one of the best pitchers I've ever seen in my life.
Incredibly dominant rookie season for Eury Perez. You went through all the stats, Chris. On top of the secondary pitches, averages 97.5 miles per hour at the fastball as well. And his season was kind of derailed when he got sent down to the minors. Mm-hmm. And you see that in his first 11 starts before being sent down. He was amazing. His final 8 starts after returning to the majors just did not look like the same pitcher. 2 follow-up questions on Eury Perez. Where do you rank him among Grayson Rodriguez and Bobby Miller? It kind of feels like those guys are a trio, maybe unfairly, but it's Grayson, it's Bobby Miller, it's Eury. How do you rank that group? And what do you think the innings get up to? You kind of threw the number 170 out there, but is that what you're actually expecting?
I think 170. I mean, look, he's a pitcher. He's a young pitcher. He's a pitcher who throws 98 miles an hour. Like, a lot of things can go wrong on the way there. So if I was projecting, I think I'd probably project 140 or 150, but I think the ceiling is 175. I think he got to around 125 last year, maybe 130 between the majors and minors. So 175 is well within the range. Like you could push it to 180, and I think that it would probably be okay, but I doubt the Marlins will do that, certainly if they're not competing for a playoff spot. And I mean, they just signed Kirk Casale, so playoffs here we come. But yeah, I think there might be a shutdown at the end, which is a little frustrating, but I think 170 is a reasonable ceiling.
I mean,
yeah, in this environment,
such a small number.
Yeah, in this environment, that doesn't make him a standout in a bad way anymore.
That's the new second tier of innings, by the way.
Yeah, so I do have him a little lower than Grayson. I think Grayson's a better bet for innings. I think Yuri's the better pitcher, so it's very close. But Grayson's obviously on a much better team. Like Eury Perez might do all those things I said and win 11 games. You know, like that's also part of the problem from a fantasy perspective.
So I was actually, when I was writing my 27 biggest questions for the new season, one of them had to do with those standout sophomore pitchers, which of the 4 standout sophomore hurlers would take the next step. 4, I was including Tanner Bybee in that group with Eury Perez, Grayson Rodriguez, and Bobby Miller. And as I was writing it up, I was like, yeah, you know, they're probably all going to be limited with innings, just because they haven't built up to a ace workload yet. And as I was saying that, I was looking up the innings totals for each of them, and I was surprised how many innings they all got to. I mean, you mentioned Yuri Perez surpassed 120. That was the lowest of the 4. It was still higher than I thought, but it was the lowest of the 4. Bobby Miller surpassed 130 innings last year. Tanner Bybee surpassed 150 innings. Grayson Rodriguez surpassed 160 innings, minors, majors, and playoffs. And so I'm not sure that's such a concern even when you're drafting these guys. I mean, you can't trust that a pitcher. I think what's different about this era for projecting pitchers versus like the Jose Fernandez era of projecting pitchers is you could always kind of assume they'd get up to an ace workload eventually, and you can't assume that about anybody anymore. But if it's going to happen, it's very likely to happen as soon as this year for all of them. If we're treating an ace workload as like 170 plus innings.
And I would also just throw out the new approach, or at least one of my new approaches with pitching, is having a balance of some of those safety net guys. I feel like we have a lot more safety net guys, obviously George Kirby, but the Logan Webbs, the Zach Eflins. You can balance these out with what might be perceived as question marks that are surrounded it. But I would rather take those question mark pitchers. And there's a gajillion question mark pitchers because it could be surrounded around injuries, or it could be small sample sizes. It can be rookies. And I want to bet on talent. And Eury Perez is the talent. I mean, you rattled off elite swing and miss stuff that's in his game, a great fastball. And not to mention, you want to talk about pitchers that have ability to grow. Like a lot of young pitchers from rookies to sophomores, we're just like, okay, I hope this guy just like redoes it again. But you can also think about the organizations and the spots they're in where can they take the next step? The Marlins do a great job of development. And this guy spent last, I think it was spring training or off season with Sandy Alcantara. So let's not take it away that we also might see a newer Yuri Perez. We might see a guy that decides to throw the changeup more as he was learning that changeup from Alcantara, and this team loves changeups. We might see him alter a few things, which also might be something about the team being able to maintain some more innings. So I worry a little bit less about those. If the guy gets me 150 or above, I'm feeling a lot better nowadays, and I'm betting on talent. And you could do a good enough job to completely get any of that, whatever risk out by just getting a couple guys and some of those boring guys later in draft, the Shane Biebers of the world, the guys that are going to Merrill Kelly, that are going to just chalk up 180 or 90 innings and at least maintain a decent ERA. You can take your shots, and Yuri Perez is absolutely worth that shot.